Our next speaker is Shane Berger. I'm sure you know that he's played, cricket in South Africa from Joburg, moved on to KZN Inland, but now he's moved on to, the coaching side of sport, and of cricket, and he's coaching now in Scotland. And what he faces is something that a lot of coaches at schools face here, is a limit in resources in Scotland. He's not sitting with the huge amounts of money as like in India or South Africa or anything like that. So it'll be quite interesting to find out and speak to Shane and find out what he does to, how they maximize things in Scotland. And I've also heard from talking to other coaches how some systems overseas are actually so professional because they do have limited resources. So welcome, Shane.
Morning, Sean. How you doing? All the way from Edinburgh here. As you can see out now, well, I don't even know if you can see, it's still dark here. So we're very, very much in the middle of our winter, but it really is an absolute pleasure to be on here. And I really hope that I can make an impact, and it's good to see one or two names that I recognize. So well done to Sia too. He speaks very well, and I hope everyone would have got a lot of insight from him. He's also a man that's traveled a long journey in the game. He hasn't been scared to do the hard work. And quite often as coaches, we expect to get the top jobs, and we want to get the top jobs because they pay the best. But we sometimes forget that, working at grassroots level and doing those hard yards are probably more important. And I don't think coaches like Sia get enough credit for what they do.
So can you talk us through your journey to becoming a coach?
Wow, where do I start? I mean, for me, my journey probably started when I was still in nappies, if I'm honest, Sean. I know that's going to sound absolutely ridiculous, and people say, well, how do you start picking up coaching from there? Well, I was born into a family of coaches, should we say. My father and I, and I'm a big believer in this. It's quite often your upbringing that doesn't necessarily define you as a human being. It gives you a chance, but it's quite important in terms of creating foundations in your life. And I was born into a family. My dad was an amateur rugby player in those days. He couldn't earn money out the game, so he played rugby. And then in his spare time to make some extra cash, he became a tennis coach and a driving instructor. And as you well know, in both of those, it's teaching, it's coaching. It's dealing with people. It's trying to see people get better, make them better. Mom actually also came from a teaching background, but then also went into the driving education and still does it today. So every day I came home, the life of Shane would have been coming home and seeing Dad coaching on the court, and then seeing him jump into a car and teach someone to drive. So from a very young age, I was sort of nurtured and mentored to how to deal with people and how to probably get the best out of them. And then moving more into my career, I was very fortunate to have a 14-year playing career with 12 years with the Lions, and then moved down to KZN Inland, as you mentioned. And straight after that, I managed to get into professional coaching. But before that, I did a lot of amateur coaching. I had to, there were many times in my career where I wasn't one of those fortunate guys who got that contract, and then you got to go find work. You've got to go and find things that keep you in the game. I saw a tweet from actually an associate player just the other day by the name of Paul van Meekeren. He plays for the Netherlands, and actually during the coronavirus pandemic, he's been forced to become an Uber Eats driver. So he spends his time delivering meals to families in the Netherlands because he wants to keep this dream of playing for the Netherlands alive and go to a World Cup. So I suppose coaches are quite resilient, and players, when you are a player in a professional environment or an amateur environment, it teaches you that resilience and hopefully gives you a couple of stepping stones to become a coach one day. Just in closing on that though, I don't think you had to have been a good player or have played the game to be a coach. I think there are many other ways of getting involved, and coaching is more about your eye for coaching, your feel, you're working with people, you're getting the best out of people. And I think many on here will agree that that's what coaching is all about.
Yeah, the thing about the Uber, you hear a lot about it in golf, where guys are selling cell phones and things like that, but you don't really hear much about it in cricket. But it's exactly the same thing, especially the guys that are in the semi-pros trying to make it up into the pros. A lot of those guys are running businesses or trying to work and even some of the pros have got to. I think Nicky van der Berg runs his own law firm out of the Wanderers, currently out of the Wanderers. He's got one of the boxes of the Wanderers, and he works out of there. So a lot of guys have to do that.
Absolutely. I'll use myself as an example because I can speak from from a truthful background. Is I had to set up my own one-on-one coaching. I remember it was still at Old Park Tonians, and I mentioned there were quite a few years I didn't have a contract. If I didn't set up that coaching and then earn that money to be able to play cricket, and then actually in the winters go overseas, and sometimes to the detriment of my own game, because maybe, for example, you might be asked to stay and attend an academy. With you saying, listen, coach, I'm really sorry, I've got to go overseas and make some money. And quite often coaches, well, especially, maybe a decade or so ago, weren't as worried about, mental health and all these other things we speak about nowadays. They would just say, well, you're missing your opportunity. You're behind the pecking order when you come back the next season. But actually, you've got to go and earn money. So yeah, look, it's great to hear stories about guys like Nicky and these guys. I remember Stephen Cook as a great example when I played with him. Ultimate professional. He actually studied a law degree while he was playing the game. And I think having that balance between studying, doing something outside of the game really does it. It takes a lot of pressure off your cricket and actually gives you the opportunity to switch on and off. And I think that's really, really important because quite often this game of cricket is, it takes a long period to play, a long time to play. And you can get so entrenched and so engulfed in this game of cricket that it's, it really can put too much pressure on you. So I think it's all about having a balance in life, isn't it?
It is. And then now you're overseas now, and you've got pretty much a problem that some of the schools face in South Africa, but it's actually a problem that all schools faces. So some schools have got pretty decent resources, and they don't maximize on their resources. They take it a bit for granted. I'm talking about not just resources as in facilities, but also as in the amount of players. You get some schools with 4 or 5 teams, and then other schools that come through with one team and they battle to keep their players and they don't have the same kind of facilities. So how do you in Scotland, you don't quite have the same facilities and resources as what England does. And sometimes England come and poach some of your players to play for them. So how do you manage that with your resources, and how do you maximize on that?
Sean, it's a fantastic question. I probably won't have the perfect answer for you because that's a challenge that we're still trying to balance every single day of our lives over here. I'll give you a great story. I arrived in Scotland on the 5th of March 2019, and I was always aware that cricket was very much a big game in Scotland. You don't quite realize how big it is until you get here. And I remember arriving on a cold and dark and a rainy morning in Edinburgh with about 4 different jackets on, getting into the cab. And the cab drivers are quite animated and quite, let's just call it, they love their football over here. And got chatting to the cab driver, and he said, look, what are you here to do? And I said, I'm here to coach cricket. And he kind of almost stopped the vehicle, looked back at me and said, we don't play cricket in Scotland. So that was like the first sort of person I'd met in Scotland and seen in Scotland. And that was the message that was being delivered to the national head coach arriving to come and, make Scotland, take them to World Cups, etc., etc. And look, it wasn't a great first message, but what I then realized is we have a real challenge of being mainstream. How do we make cricket mainstream? And that's a challenge that every associate and full member country is going to have. But in South Africa, cricket's very much a mainstream sport. You only need to go down and watch a mini cricket festival or go and watch a schools game to see, how important cricket is in the culture of South Africa. Whereas in Scotland, a lot of the schools don't play cricket. They don't have facilities. A lot of the state schools certainly wouldn't play cricket. It's more an upmarket sport, should we say. If you go to a private school, you can play the game, and that's also our opportunity now to grow it at grassroots level. And we have a great development team that goes in and does some good jobs at schools, and that's something we constantly faced with. So what do we have in Scotland? We have a very limited resources in terms of facilities. We don't have a national facility, for example. So whenever we train, it's a constant hire of other facilities, and then you throw in, a weather pattern that is probably the worst in the world in terms of trying to play cricket. We all know you need dry weather, and Scotland isn't very kind to us in that way. So I arrived and we played Sri Lanka and Bangladesh in the first couple of months that I arrived. And out of the 4 ODIs we played, we probably bowled about 20 overs of cricket or 30 overs of cricket. And, right there and then you realize, well, this is going to be a challenge, and we're going to have to be proactive and think of ways to still get the game on. So moving forward, in terms of that's where we are, so you kind of go, right, well, this is where we are. What do we need to do? So we've identified, well, maybe we need to be the world leaders in getting covers off the pitch as quickly as we can. Maybe we need to be the world leaders in having the best covers. Maybe we need to play on artificial surfaces that allow us to still play the game. So it's constantly thinking about how you can move that process forward. And I think we've done a terrific job, but I think we're still massively challenged with resources and facilities. And that's why it's quite nice to relate to this topic that we're talking about, because we are very much playing, we ranked 14th in the world currently, and we don't have our own home ground that we play cricket at. And for me, there's something wrong about that, but actually it comes down to having the finances to build cricket stadiums, to build cricket pitches, to have, it's not a cheap sport to play. Many of you just need to go into your local store and try to buy a cricket bat and realize how expensive the game is. So that's a challenge in itself. So as Sia was talking about a young township boy that's got to catch 3 taxis to get to school, that's a social challenge, and then throw in a couple of cricket bats and the actual kit, it almost becomes an impossible journey that cricketer embarks on, but still possible. And with us being proactive, and as a coach, I believe it's your job to make sure that you look after all these players, and you think out the box. And quite often we don't do that, but I think the modern day coach is more equipped with better skills now to be able to do that.
And you've been quite lucky that you've got quite a few players who've quite dedicated to the side, that have stuck there, like a Kyle that's still there playing at 36 years old, and some of the guys, and they could easily, because the money's not the same as somebody playing, for England or for South Africa. So to get the guys to stay there must be quite difficult, and to keep them motivated must be difficult.
It is, Sean, and I think just to touch on that, Kyle, who is our captain and has been playing for Scotland, him and 1 or 2 others have been playing for a very long period of time. Most of their careers, most of their lives, what they're getting paid would be what an entry-level contract at a county team would be, for a young player. So quite often it's very tough to let them keep their eye on the ball, as to say, here in Scotland. And that's where you've got to give guys like Kyle and the other senior players massive credit for their absolute hunger and passion to want to play, for this Scottish badge, for us. And that's where we try to use the motivation of, we bring in values that are really meaningful to us. What is the greater cause? What are you playing for? Well, if you're not playing for money, what is it? Is it the opportunity to represent your country? Is it the opportunity to maybe represent your country, and then within that brings other opportunities? So maybe you go to an IPL, which ultimately brings you financial rewards. Or is it going to a World Cup and just putting in a great display that will make your family proud of you? So we use different motivations, and we try to really bring in the values and the behaviors behind that. And Carl and the senior players are certainly guys that represent those. And Sean, I can use this as a story. I've been doing individual performance plans with players throughout the sort of lockdown period, and going into our training now that we've been doing over here, even through lockdown. We're still in a lockdown here in Scotland, for example. And the one thing that's really impressed me is the motivation of those senior players, even though they're not getting paid well, is still probably right up there in terms of the squad. And even a Kyle Kutzer at the age of 36 still sees himself playing in the World Cup in 2023, and that'll take him to 39 years of age. But if you only need to look at Darren Stevens, who's 46 and still competing well in the county championship, that age is just a number. And for me, it's more about a mindset and your dedication to fitness and various other things that keeps you on the park longer. So we're very much a nation where anything is possible, and we believe in doing the impossible. And we always feel that we very much have to punch above our weight as a country. But in my opinion, and as a coach, I believe that makes players more resilient, and tells me a lot about players when they're not doing it for the money.
I actually think that Darren Stevenson is probably going through one of the best periods in his life at cricket at the moment. And, he's adapted his game to, I think, more of an intelligent game than just playing, gets out there. So now, and I don't think it's unique to South Africa that we are having a bit of a drop off in the amount of kids that play cricket, because it takes a lot of time. Meanwhile, you've got a football that takes, within 80 minutes, the game's over, or some schools are only insisting on playing T20 cricket. How do you keep the motivation going? Because I think you've got the same thing there, but, kids in Scotland play rugby and football, or Gaelic rules or something like that, but they don't play, they often would go to that instead of a cricket. So how do you keep them motivated?
So, the biggest sport in Scotland is obviously football. Scotland have just qualified now for their first Euro event for many, many years. And as you can imagine, the country was ecstatic about that, and we all were. And that brings a different energy and with it. But I think, we only play white ball cricket too, Sean. So we really focus on the white ball game in terms of the 50 over and the T20 format. And I think, something that's really important in the game for me is still holding on to those red ball skills, that you need to work on to. I think it's far easier to take a good red ball cricketer with good basics, with the ability to bat a long period of time, with the ability to come back as a seam bowler and come and bowl that extra spell. I think it's far easier to take a player like that as a coach and turn him into a 50 over player or a T20 player than it is the other way around. But other players have shown us, aka David Warners of the world, that they can do it and they can transition into test match cricket with that expansive game plan. But he's probably also had to rein it in within test cricket, and maybe that's made him a better white ball player. So we do only focus on the shorter formats, and the reason for that is, for us to become a full member of the ICC, there's a whole tick the box activities that you need to do, and we've got a few more that we need to achieve, and part of those is beating full members like South Africa, England, who Scotland beat in 2018 here in Scotland. That goes a long way to you becoming a full member. So that's why we probably focus on those formats. But I think as a young player, I think the grounding that red ball cricket teaches you and the opportunity that young players have in South Africa to learn those skills, to get all the various formats is massive for a player's development. But with my white ball hats on at the moment, I really see the opportunity to focus on those as a real advantage for us, and hopefully when the red ball opportunities come up again, we can pick those up again and go with them.
So we've got a question here about attitude. It's important in everything in life, but we've spoken about the side that you're limited in resources, so you don't have many resources. But then you got the side where some schools have got huge amounts of resources, and if a kid's not playing well, it's okay. Somebody else will take his place. How do you still work with that kid, even though you've got somebody else that'll come through and somebody's really struggling? How do you work with the kids, and how do you, get them to improve or not just take advantage of your resources?
I think, Sean, it's very much dependent on which country in the world you're in. I think a lot of it comes down to the culture of your country and how you grow up as a young player. I'll just use a few examples. I think let's use South Africa as an example. As a young player, you probably have the best weather in the world to grow up and play any sport you choose. If I spoke about the challenges we have in terms of weather. So a young Scottish boy growing up in our system would find it very tough to pick up the game. So, when cricket games keep getting called off, suddenly he goes into football. So the other thing we need to remember too is from an affordability point of view, we spoke about cricket bats and that. It's far easier to get one piece of kit, which is a football or rugby ball, and not have to buy anything else. So that's a challenge in itself. So I love looking into the Indian system and how it works over there, and you look at the extreme poverty that they are faced with, and you look at some of the conditions they play on, and they manage to produce amazing cricketers. And I think the reason for that is that tough upbringing of that cutthroat, I need to make it, I need to cater for my family. As an Indian cricketer, if you make it, your family is looked after for generations to come. So they use that as their motivation. And I suppose any young player, it's for me, it's what's your motivation? What's your purpose for doing what you're doing? you know, and unfortunately for some, it's make it or nothing, or I'm on the streets, you know, and that you can use to your advantage, but that you can also use to your detriment sometimes. And I think a country like India really does that well. You know, in South Africa, I think we have such a unique culture, and you throw all the cultural mixes into the pot, and you know, we just produce some of the world's most incredible cricketers because I think players have to be so resilient from a young age. You know, you look at any race that you're in now to play for South Africa, and Sia mentioned this, you've got to be in the, you know, you've got a 1% chance of playing for your country. You know, the example I use sometimes is you probably have more chance of winning the lottery than sometimes playing for your country. Now, many will think about that. We're going, well, what's the point of me even playing then? Well, I say, well, you still have a chance. You know, you still have that opportunity to play for your country. And a week in cricket is a long time. I don't know what it would be like in other sports, but I always say to the players, a week in cricket is a long time. You go and put 2-3 performances in, suddenly you get spoken about, you know, and all of a sudden in a year, 2-3 years time, you could be playing in the IPL. So you're always 5 performances away from moving on to that next level. You know, and that's something you have to hold on to and believe in. And, you know, and it's just a case of, you know, do you really believe you can be the next AB de Villiers or a Kagiso Rabada? Do you really believe that? And they also came from somewhere and they still made it. So there's many examples of that. So again, it comes down to what is your purpose? What is your motivation for doing something? And if you really want to do something, you'll do it. So in my mind, finances don't guarantee success. Attitudes and good behaviors do. And consistency, you know, that's for me. And what are your own standards that you're setting? Quite often we look at coaches as players and say, well, what are you giving me? I think players have to switch that around and say, this is what I'm bringing to the party. You know, this is what I'm about. And it's about them staying true to that and being who they really are.
Yeah, I often got in the past, especially when I was younger and used to do quite a few road races. People would come up to me and say, did you win? And I say, well, no, of course not. And they say, well, why did you take part then? It's different kind of motivation behind things.
Absolutely.
So when you're looking for talent now, how do you identify your talent? What do you look for in a player?
It's a very good question, Sean. I think, you know, I mentioned we only play the white ball game at the moment. So, you know, for example, as a batsman, we are looking for players that, well, let me maybe use my individual performance plan as an example. So as a batter, we believe you need 5 things. You know, it's how you face extreme pace, number one. So can you go around the world and face the world's best quick bowlers, you know, and if you can't, it's what are you lacking within your game to be able to do that? So we want to see guys that can face real extreme pace, your Mitchell Starks of the world, your Pat Cummins. And I know I'm now speaking from a very high performance, you know, place, but I think many people can use this at their own levels and come up with their own parameters of what's important, you know. So number one in the batting department is, can you face pace? You know, number 2 is, how well do you rotate strike? How well do you get on the other? How well can you get onto the other end or back on strike if you need to? The third thing is facing spin. You know, if you want to face world-class spin, what does that look like in your game? Do you have a game to combat that? Can you hit square of the wicket? Can you sweep if someone's bowling really well? You know, do you play well off the back foot? So that's very much according to conditions too. You know, then the other one is, how well do you run between the wickets? We really value that now, and our strength and conditioning trainer that we have here in Scotland, that we've pulled him in, and he believes there's certain physical attributes that underpin that. So running between the wickets, well, you've got to be quick. You've got to be able to turn. You've got to be able to be strong. You know, so those are all attributes that add to that. And then, you know, the last thing is, and probably the most important for us here in Scotland, is how well do you attack? You know, can you find a boundary when you need to? Can you hit sixes? Can you hit fours? Because what we found as a stat is when we hit more boundaries than the opposition, we generally win more cricket games. So that's something that we really value, and those are the things that we've picked up. And then from a bowling point of view, I'm not going to go through them all individually, but we probably use similar sort of parameters. You know, now for us, those are things that underpin playing international cricket. There are many, many more. There's your fitness, there's your fielding, there's your sports psych that gets pulled into it, and I'm not going to go into all of that. That's webinars on their own. But I think when you throw everything into the mix, you suddenly realize, well, this is the sort of player we're looking for. And I really do believe this, Sean. You know, you can have all those attributes, but you can rock up with a poor attitude and behave really badly, and sometimes you can let yourselves down. Whereas if you maybe don't have all those attributes and you show really good attitude and a commitment to want to get those attributes better, I think that gives you a better chance of making it in the world and makes you more resilient. So that when you are underperforming or you're failing at times, that gets you back into being successful for rather quicker than getting told how good you are the whole time, and then suddenly you come out of that environment and you fail for the first time and you hit rock bottom. So I think being able to make kids learn as quickly as possible about success and failure at school, I think is really, really important. But quite often kids come out of school and have only ever achieved success, depending on wherever they might have been and whatever school they might have gone to. And then when they do get into the big bad world, which is professional sport, and you're playing for contracts, that can be a very daunting experience.
Now, I brought up this question with Sia in just a general conversation between the two of us. And pretty much the answer could have gone on for hours because, Sia is quite passionate about it. But a lot of players get typecast. And we've got, if you look at the professional side, you get like an Eddie Moore fighting against, what's his name? Middle order batsman for the Warriors, or you get like a Hashim Amla, or he's only a one-day player, he can't play test matches, or the other way around, or Temba Bavuma is only a test player. But it's actually much bigger than that when it comes to schools. They really typecast players. And Sia was telling me about a kid that if it wasn't for him actually being there on his first day at Cartoon Lions doing an interview, this kid wouldn't have actually made, well, never mind the under-19s. He played in the under-19 World Cup last year, but he wouldn't have even made his first team at school. Now, how do you stop this typecasting player, and how do you approach it from yourself? Because we do this a hell of a lot in South Africa.
Again, a few examples of that, Sean. Sometimes, players are late maturers in their careers, and quite often, and I think modern day sport, we fall foul of that nowadays because we want to see the finished article at 16, 17, 18 years old. The reality of that is it's very rare to find the finished article there because they're never going to be the finished article. Even A.B. de Villiers to this day in his career, and I don't want to speak for him, but he would still tell you that the areas of his game that he's working on. Now he's a multi-millionaire that's been very successful in the game, and there's still areas he's trying to work on. Any professional rugby player would probably tell you that too. You could play many years for the Springboks, but there's still areas of your game you want to work on. So the reason I say that is we're very quick as coaches to maybe push players aside if they're not at a certain level at certain ages, or they're not possessing those qualities or those attributes that I was speaking about. And I believe that's your job as a coach to nurture them and get those attributes out of them, those qualities that you want to be seeing. Dale Steyn did not bowl quick at school. He came out of school and was a product of maybe not bowling at school. That's why he maybe played so many test matches for South Africa. There's many, many other examples you can use too. Sometimes your best schoolboy batsmen come through, and I spoke about that, not dealing with failure too well. Sometimes Devon Conway is a great example. He's playing for New Zealand A at the moment and will go on to play for the Black Caps. He's a fantastic cricketer and a great guy. He's probably scored the most schoolboy centuries I could think of, and unfortunately fell foul to our system through his own demise, probably in terms of his performances, and didn't quite perform to the levels that he expected, and maybe a few others expected, and that's maybe why he didn't come through the system. And there's many reasons for that too. But he's now found a system that he can feel comfortable in, get that support around him, and now he's going to go play for the Black Caps. So sometimes it doesn't work for certain players and systems, and quite often Kevin Peterson's a good example of that too. Get away and work on your game and use that as motivation, probably more so than anything, to play for another country. Now, many people, that won't please them when players do that, but actually you've got to have a huge amount of respect for players that go and do that. And I really believe our job as coaches is to nurture those players. But you're falling foul if you really believe you're gonna make an impact in every player's life. Not everybody's gonna like you. Not everybody's gonna believe in your philosophy. Not everybody's gonna believe in everything you're saying. And I think as coaches, as long as you have 70 to 80% following you, that's a pretty good following to have, and that's something quite high to hold on to.
I mean, a guy like Warner most probably would have been typecast as a T20 player in South Africa and never played Test cricket. And look at his record now; it's phenomenal. I know we are changing that; we are becoming a lot better, but we were very blinkered at one stage of what guys could do.
Yeah.
That's so. You know, with this side, talent identification side of it, you see these players coming through the system. You see a player that's actually, let me put it this way. For me, even a player like Alan Donald, he wouldn't have been the player he was without finding that specific coach that really resonated with him. But now you're coming in as a coach. How do you make sure that you're that person that resonates with as many players as possible, that you understand your players a lot better and they can perform with under you, instead of doing like a Kevin Peterson having to go overseas and finding that player, that coach, you that coach yourself?
Just on Alan Donald, before I move on to your other question, Sean, I think what Alan did incredibly well was he sought opportunity to play cricket. He went to Warwickshire for, I think it was 10 years in a row to play, and that longevity, that helped for longevity in his career. I mean, how he did it, I don't quite know. Alan bowled quicker than anybody, and he did it constantly for 10 to 12 years. So he sought opportunity, and I think opportunity makes players better. And we talk a lot about opportunity in South Africa. Players need the opportunity to fail. Players need the opportunity to succeed. And that's really, really important. To move on to your actual question, which I've actually lost my train of thought speaking about Alan Donald. So remind me about your question again, Sean, please.
It's how do you make sure that you're that coach that resonates with as many of your players as possible?
Yeah, good. And again, another good question. I think, I had the advantage of being a player, Sean. And I think a lot of the time I try to think like a player would. I try to think, well, what would not me specifically, but what would that player need at this time in his career? What does he really need to be able to become a better player? Is it a technical thing that he needs in his game? Is it a mental, something he needs to work on his side of his game? Is it a physical attribute that he's got to work on? Is he just physically not strong enough to bat for a long period of time? And I think, as coaches, we quite often judge players just in the nets, and we love training in the nets, and we think that that's the way to develop players, and quite often it isn't. We want to give them that opportunity to do it in a match, create more match-style scenarios, see how they handle pressure. And I think there's many, many ways of seeing how your players handle pressure. It doesn't just have to be through training. It doesn't just have to be through playing. It can be watching the behaviors in the gym, watching their behaviors in terms of keeping time, and then going really deep and finding out more about your players. What's their background? What's their family situation like? What are their communication skills like? Putting a player on an interview, let's say we had to put a player on an interview like this, a webinar, that puts a certain amount of pressure on a player and forces him to speak about the game that they're playing and quite often about their own games. And I think that teaches them a lot too. So as coaches, you often hear us say, well, if only I knew what I knew now when I was still playing. Well, Sean, I can promise you, if I knew the things I knew now and the way that the game's developed and gone, I certainly believe if I put that into my own game, I would have been a far better player than I was. And it's just having that knowledge and someone to back you and that person that can bring that out of you that really leaves you in a good place in your career. Now, I'll be completely honest when I say this. I did not have many coaches that did that for me. However, I was surrounded with some really good coaches that I was able to nitpick and take a couple of things that they did that I thought was really valuable and put that into my own coaching style. So that's that for me is where I was really lucky in my career. But I had one or two that I really valued and backed me and got the best out of me.
What advice would you have for those young coaches who want to create a private coaching program, particularly guys with limited resources? So somebody like there was a lady asking earlier on if how to create like her own hub within a township. How can they take advantage of their limited resources and create their own program?
Well, look, for you to be able to do that, you need a ball, you need a bat. You don't need the fanciest nets. You don't need a fancy cricket field. You can I used the Indian example earlier. You go to India and see how they manage to play cricket, and it's probably on this long field, and they just play different games of cricket. That's the other thing too. You look at different ways of playing the game. You don't have to play conventional cricket to get people involved in the game. You know, you could play an abbreviated version of it. You could play quick cricket. You could. So I suppose anything that gets people actively involved in the game is a great way to go about it. So yes, you need a few resources. Probably you need a couple of cricket bats and balls, but you know, if you don't have those, you know, that's your challenge in terms of trying to source those and trying to make sure that you can get something on. So you don't need a hell of a lot, Sean, to get the game going. But I suppose your challenge comes in if you really want to make those players move on to the next level. You know, what do you do then? Because you probably do need a bit of better equipment, and you do need nets, and you do need other things. But I think we have an amazing system in South Africa, which is called the hub system. You know, it's very unique to anywhere else in the world, you know, where it gets these underprivileged kids to come into the townships or their hubs or whatever it might be and play the game. And I think Cricket South Africa has done incredibly well to get that program on. And I think you'll probably see the fruits of that program. Well, you've already seen the fruits of that program, but I think you'll see the real fruits of that program in five years to come, once those kids really start coming through the system. I think it gives them a real chance. And then you look at the mini cricket program, how many kids come through that system. So I would also encourage those people who would like to do that to maybe surround themselves with other people that have done it before. Don't be scared to ask questions. Don't be scared to ask for help. You know, sometimes you'll be amazed how helpful the people are working in these systems, and actually it helps their own program if you go out and make your own program. So never, you know, I'm never threatened by someone going out and doing private coaching and open up their own structures, because I believe that's the best thing for the game. You know, the more people out there doing it and doing it correctly and doing it for the right reasons, I think it's good for the game.
Yeah, there's, sorry, I was actually trying to look for, there's some pictures that I've got of a school between Mthatha and Port St. John's, and they've got no running water, they've got one electrical plug in the school. And this headmaster at the school loves his cricket, and they've got a very good cricket program. They've even had the Proteas come to the school twice now because of his program. And he's managed to build nets eventually at his school. He's got a cricket field at his school, and a lot of it's played on like sand, and he hasn't been limited by that. One of the things that coaches face is that they've pressurized to get results. And they, especially with the guys that go to hardball cricket in primary school, and they even the guys that skip the mini cricket program, and they push pressure for results. So then they get you've always got kids that develop a lot quicker than other kids, especially that age group. And they play 4 kids, bat, ball, everything, and the rest of the guys end up being fielders. And we get a huge dropout with that. So how do coaches actually manage that kind of process? Because they've got to give everybody a chance to play, but then of course they're getting pressurized from the parents and the headmasters as to, you know, to get results.
Well, sometimes one of the toughest jobs for a coach is actually dealing with the parents, not so much the kids. You know, because the parents sometimes, you know, expect very, very high standards for their own kids, and they set high expectations for their own kids. And then quite often, you know, the biggest thing a coach has to deal with are those parents and those stakeholders within the game. And that, unfortunately, is sometimes where we fall foul of really developing our own coaching and doing the right thing for that kid. So to try and answer your question, Sean, I think as a coach, you really have to understand is what are you there to do? You know, if I'm here to win, which, you know, it's a very hard place to be in. If you're forced into a situation where you have to win every cricket game in a school or a club or wherever else you are, you're in quite a tough position, because you might need your best players to do that for you. But I think as a coach, you're always there to develop, and you're always there to nurture. And if you are in an environment like that, it's finding what works best for you in that situation. So I'm one of those coaches. I find it very hard to sit and watch. When I watch schoolboy cricket and I see coaches get really involved and shouting from the side and all that, whilst I think there's a way to get your message across, sometimes you've got to allow a kid to fail. And I keep speaking about that, to actually get things right. That doesn't mean you just let things go on if they're blatantly wrong, but there's a certain way of doing it. And I think kids learn and players learn through getting things wrong to be able to get them right. As long as they don't keep repeating the same mistakes, you know, then that's fine. So where we're particularly poor is through our leaders, I think. through our captains. You know, we very much shout, if we're an umpire, we'll set the field, we'll do all that. But actually, that's the opportunity for the captain and the other players in the team to do that, and the bowler. You know, I think it's really good that the bowler sets the field, because ultimately he's delivering the ball. So it's how we can create that environment and still look to win. And I think when you get that balance, and whatever that balance looks like to you, I think that's probably the biggest challenge every single coach might face. I don't have the perfect answer for you, because some schools do set really, really high expectations. You know, they have scholarships, they have bursaries that go to schools. And then there's some schools who are just happy to participate. So again, you know, the stat is, you know, you can still make it if you've gone to a state school. You don't have to go to a private school to play for your country. And I think the stats might even earn more on the state schools, producing more Proteas and Springboks and football players than anybody else. So you know, that they've got to be doing something right.
So there's a question here: what is the talent in Scotland like compared to South Africa, and what are your unique challenges?
Well, you have to remember, South Africa is so unique because we have such a great school system. The amount of talent flying out of South Africa is just frightening. You only need to look at players that have left the country to see how much talent there is. And that's not the only marker. You know, there's many guys that stay in South Africa and make a fantastic career for themselves. But you only need to look at that. The guys who are now playing for the French rugby side, the Scottish rugby team. You know, I walk into to watch a game of rugby here in Scotland, and half the team are South Africans. You know, and which is nice, because you hear a bit of Afrikaans every now and then, and it makes you feel like you're at home. But so there's talent oozing out of our system, and there's a reason for that, and it's because of such a strong schools culture and traditions, and maybe it goes down to that winning mindset you spoke about, Sean. You know, that ruthlessness and that resilience to make it and want to play sport for your country, and it probably comes down to that. But what it's like in Scotland is we have very limited talent. But I suppose where we utilize that is we are able to give that limited talent more opportunity to play, rather than having to mix it up too much, having to keep bringing in new young guys into the team. So we do it more over a longer period of time, I would say, and really focus our attention on training and making sure that those players are ready to play when they do. Whereas in South Africa, you could have 5 games in that example as I used, and you could be playing for the Proteas. So yeah, we're incredibly lucky in South Africa. I suppose our challenge in South Africa is, how do we keep everybody happy? You can't. You're going to lose players to other systems. But you know what? We need to almost see that as an advantage that we have. We are producing fantastic sportsmen. And because we have so many, sometimes they just have to leave and seek opportunity elsewhere. And we've got to use that to our advantage. But in Scotland, we have look, don't get me wrong, we have some fantastic talent. You know, I see and I watch, and some of the 15, 16, 17-year-olds that we have in our current system have an amazing opportunity of playing and going to a World Cup. You know, they're that good, and the future is very bright for Scottish cricket. We just got to make sure that we keep getting better and we keep nurturing that talent, and that's the key in any system.
Apparently, Garnet Kruger's got a very good system going, where he actually uses limited resources and teaches kids how to play with limited resources. So we'll try and find out a bit more about that. It must be quite interesting. So there's a question here about schools in Scotland. So you don't have too many schools, or there's not as many kids playing cricket at schools in Scotland. How do you actually find these players, especially if you can go, like, I don't know, 2 months without actually having a cricket game? It must be quite tough to find somebody.
Well, we really value our club system in Scotland, you know, and I think club cricket probably taken a huge hit around the whole world. I remember walking out the one day in Edinburgh, and walking through about a 2-mile radius and seeing probably eight or 9 cricket games going on, club games, and you sometimes look and go, oh, there's another club game, and that's great, because you know people are playing the games. So it's the same happens in Australia. Is they don't have this fantastic school structure that we have in South Africa, but what they do encourage players to do is, if you want to take your game to another level, you go and play for clubs. And they really encourage and they build a great club culture and vibe. You know, that's something we probably, you know, traditionally don't do very well in South Africa. Maybe universities have done that pretty well. But I think that's the area that South Africa can focus on, is really making sure that our club cricket remains strong and keeps producing players through that way. So that drop off of participation from schools to club is probably quite big and quite significant. And but in Scotland, we find that even though we don't have a lot of school cricket, when you rock up at a club game on a Saturday or Sunday, there's a lot of people playing. And that's really exciting, and it's also very unique that our Scottish players still play in the club structures in Scotland. You know, it's not often you'll see a Proteas player playing club cricket in South Africa, not because they don't want to, but because they're busy. They're all around the world. They're playing in other competitions. They're resting. Etc. Etc. Here, a lot of our Scottish cricketers are still playing club cricket. So you could rock up in a club game and have 2 or 3 international Scottish cricketers playing in those teams. And I think that's good for them. That's also good for the people around them playing with those players. So we need to utilize that to our advantage to just keep working on our good club structures.
There was an article in ESPN that spoke about how our players don't play as much, even for their franchises or unions, as what the English players do or the Australian players do. I mean, how important is that actually for keeping people in the system to, you know, if somebody comes to a club and then they've got a Protea player playing with them and they start learning from the Protea player, like especially a youngster, they can actually learn a hell of a lot more. So when they get into the higher age groups or they get into professional cricket, they're really that step ahead, which the English players and Australian players seem to have, and Indian players.
Absolutely. I walked into a club environment at Old Parks. I joined them when I was 14 years of age. And what that really did for me was spending time around older players, better players than me, more experienced players than me, that were able to pass that knowledge on to me. You know, I actually found, Sean, you know, in my day when I was playing cricket, I actually learned more from the players than I did from the coaches. And that's no disrespect to the coaches. I had some fantastic coaches, but actually I had some really good senior players that were able to, you know, to take me on that journey with them. And that's where I was really fortunate. And I think that's something we probably lack now. We've lost that older guy, should we say, playing club cricket. We really sometimes undervalue how important that is, you know. So I would quite often, my weekends were made up of playing school cricket on a Saturday and then going playing club cricket on a Sunday. Now, when you go into club cricket on a Sunday, you're facing guys who bowl quicker than school bowlers. You know, you're getting put under pressure in a different way. You're bowling to better batters. And that's how my game really transformed over a couple of years very quickly and really made me a far better player. I don't think I would have been able to play the game unless I got involved, or play the game at a high level, unless I had that nurturing from a young age. And then there's the other thing, you know, you learn about, it makes you mentally tougher very quickly. So you're suddenly playing with older players that are, you know, not speaking a different language, but saying things in a different way. Whereas when you're playing with your peers at school, you're not exposed to that. So it's good. It's just about finding the right balance and finding what works for you. And I would really encourage any young player to join clubs. I was very fortunate to go through a good university too, which allowed me to play club champs and all that, which teaches you a lot about the game. You know, club champs is, and I don't know how much we still value a club champs, but in my mind, it was one of the greatest experiences I've ever had in my life. You know, you got a club champ tournament, you've got to win 6 games in a row. Well, when we were playing, it was 6 days of cricket in a row to win that club champs. And that teaches you a lot about yourself and about others around you, you know, whether you can go on and play at the next level, because that's a grind, day-to-day grind. And I hope that we can still find that within our clubs in South Africa and here in Scotland.
One of the challenges that Coach Sear finds, or he faces, is that one of our players in the under-19 team go and play against like an India or even playing against Afghanistan and teams like that. And they're these kids that have played professional cricket. They're coming in with 10, 15 games, especially some kids in the IPL. And from his side, I mean, they struggle to sometimes get players released from their schools to play franchise cricket because they're good enough to make those teams. But there's 2 parts to that. So there's one part is that should the players be released so they can play at a high level? Because at the end of the day, you want the best for that child and want that child to develop the best. But then the other side is that these coaches can't do that because their schools and the teachers are telling them that they have to win all their games at school. It's a difficult thing to balance. Have you found that challenge, and you know, how can we try and get through that?
Yeah, it's a challenge that I don't know if it ever will go away with the competitive nature of schools cricket in South Africa. And I think I suppose those coaches in those positions have to really ask themselves the question: are they doing the right thing for that child? You know, are they putting winning ahead of actually maybe potentially not giving that child the opportunity to play at the highest level? You know, I played with a young Quinton de Kock at the age of 15. And I remember seeing Quinton for the first time, and you could just watch him play, and you knew he was going to make it. You could just see it. There was something about him. Now, Quinton left school at a younger age and went on, and he's done amazing things in the game. Now, I wonder if Quinton didn't leave school at a young. I'm not encouraging people to leave school. That's not my message I'm sending this morning, trust me. But I'm saying if he didn't, and the coaches surrounding him at that time weren't making those decisions, would Quinton have gone through and made it? He probably still would because he's a special talent. But there's many examples that I'm sure Sia would see in the schools where they just got released and gave them the opportunity to play more club cricket, play more provincial cricket, be around different coaches, being in different environments, and them seeing the real value in that. You know, so to use the Indian example, Sean, you know, and Sia would have seen this having worked at that level. You know, a young Indian player that plays for India under 19 probably has about 30 first-class games under his belt already. You know, we sometimes have our under 19s playing for South Africa. They wouldn't have made their first-class debuts yet. Now, that comes down to opportunity again. That comes down to the amount of teams we have. You know, in India, they could have 30 to 40 first-class teams, which means there's a lot of cricket being played. So they play a lot of cricket at a young age, where I don't think our youngsters play as much cricket as they should be at a young age. But again, that comes down to resources, pressure from schools, pressure for studies, etc., where kids really have to dedicate their time to. But we are massively behind the eight ball in terms of under 19 cricket. And the current coach, Shukri Conrad, is now the guy tasked with trying to put that all together. And he's a good guy. He certainly understands what those players need to be able to make it. And so that's going to be his challenges. You know, can he get those under 19s enough cricket to be able to perform and to be able to move on to the next level? So the under 19 Indian cricketers will probably play 160 days of cricket a year within that program, where I'd really like to see how much cricket we're playing compared to that. And you only learn in competition and under pressure, as we keep mentioning, Sean. So yes, we face huge challenges on that side of things, but let's not forget how good our school structures are and how much talent we produce through those structures. So our challenge, you know, our question is, how do we utilize that talent? How do we nurture that talent in the current system that we are in that is very unique to South Africa? And I suppose the Indian system does it their way. Let's do it our way. Let's not always look at the other systems and see what they're doing when actually maybe we're doing a really good job and we just maybe need to tweak one or two things. You know, I always say this to every system. It's very easy as a rugby nation to look and seeing what the All Blacks are doing. But what the All Blacks do is they play according to their culture and their beliefs, and that's their style of rugby. You know, the reason we won the 2019 Rugby World Cup is we played our style of rugby, and a style of rugby that suited us. And we need to do the same in all our sports.
I'm just trying to look for his name. I can't remember his name, though. There's a little 16-year-old that from Hilton that's playing a lot of cricket at the moment for KZN Inland. I think he will be 17 now.
Van Staden.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, Van Staden, a very good young player. And you know what? Credit to Inland for pulling him in early. And credit to the school for allowing him to play from a young age. I remember when I was at Inland, I must admit the schools are very good in the area. We had a Mondli Kamalo playing, you know, so they would quite often release players to come and play for us and saw the value of playing at a higher level. And again, it's prioritizing, you know, that's all it is. The other thing too, Sean, is how do you expect that if you haven't had that chat with maybe the other coaches or the headmaster? Are you communicating in the right way? You know, at the end of the day, everything comes down to communication. You know, if you haven't had that communication, you can't just expect things to happen.
Well, I do feel that there's a reason why certain provinces do well at the Kaima Julu Week, and it's not just due to the schools, and it's due to the interaction between the unions and the schools and the relationship that they've got. Gauteng's very good at that. I think Western Province is very good at that, and some of the unions are very, very good. There's a good communication. They even structure their coaching sessions around that, which is quite nice.
That's good. It's good to hear that.
So, well, thank you very much. I think we actually do have a lot more questions, but we could go on for hours here. But thank you so much. I think the sun must be just rising in the background. It looks like there's a slightly blue tinge.
Let's have a look. It's a bit of a grey day. Well, look, it's 8 o'clock in the morning here now, and generally the sun will only come up at about 9 o'clock. But Sean, I'm happy to take a few more questions if there is time. Otherwise, no pressure.
So there is a question about the mental strength of players. It's just as important, if not more important, than the physical attributes that the player's got. How do you gauge a player's mental strength and whether the player can handle the pressure during identifying a player, or even prior? Yeah, I mean, a player does exceptionally well, let's say, at a school, but how do you know he's going to do well outside of school? Does he have the mental strength to do that?
Yeah, it's absolutely, it's probably 80% in the mind once you get to the highest level. It's dealing with that pressure. It's dealing with, it's not just the pressure of the game. It's the pressure of your surroundings. It's the media that put more pressure onto you. You'll be talking the top guys. They can be, I've seen many guys who are great school cricketers, but couldn't make that next step, and for me, quite often that's a mental thing, and then you look at many good club cricketers that couldn't make that next step. So you watch them play in the nets and you think, this guy's got it all. But as soon as you put him in a match environment against maybe a quicker bowler, and we spoke about those things you probably need to make it, maybe they're lacking one of those. Maybe they don't play spin very well. And now suddenly you get into a higher level of cricket and the spinners have really, they're taking control of the game. So yeah, there's many reasons for players not making it, I suppose. But I think the biggest one is the mental strength. Dealing with the constant day-to-day grind, the day-to-day pressure, the financial pressure. Suddenly you earn a lot of money. Do you have all the tools to be able to work with that money and to be able to put it and invest it for life after cricket? So yes, there's many challenges that players will have, but certainly the biggest one is the mental side of the game. And quite often we associate so much time to batting, bowling, fielding, and our fitness. But how much time do we give to the mental side of the game? How much time do we talk about leadership? How do we develop our leaders? Are we giving them the best chance to develop? Are we doing exercises where they have to problem solve? Practice isn't always about hitting and bowling cricket balls. And I think the more out the box you can think, the better for your players. And the more they can do it from a younger age, the better for them. So yeah, that would be my advice. Think out the box and don't be scared to do. You don't always have to do bat and ball to make someone achieve their goals.
There's a lot of, let's say, windmill coaching in South Africa across a lot of sports. I'm not sure if it's the same overseas, but to actually create a more intelligent player, you need to trust that player on the field. How do you go? What kind of ideas do you have in place for coaches to help youngsters get out there and make their own decisions and learn more about the game?
Quite often it's a balance in life too, Sean. If they're only dedicating their time to cricket. So for example, let's use a Scottish player, for example. Let's say he's a contracted player, but he's only going to gym in the morning and maybe playing the game of cricket. Is he really stimulating his mind enough? And his body and whatever else to be able to become the best he can be. The question you always need to ask yourself is, if sports, if life's a triangle and I've got cricket and I've got my personal life and I've got my studying life or my work life, whatever else, it's about having that balance in life. And the players often just have cricket, everything's cricket. And unfortunately, when that world is not there anymore, that's quite often when they struggle with the mental health side of things and they, suddenly cricket gets taken away from them. What do? So for me, it's about having that balance in life. And, I've fallen foul of that. I always thought life, revolved around cricket and everything, and my life still revolves massively around cricket. But I think the more you find a balance in life, the better. And actually, the more pressure it takes with your cricket. And quite often you'll find if you pick up another hobby or another passion in your life that you pick up, it quite often takes the pressure away from that cricket and you might often perform better. So it's about having that on and off mindset.
Yeah, but also for getting guys to understand the game better so you've got a captain in the field, and often you get the coach at the side of the field screaming at the captain. And this is across all sports. and asking them and telling them what to do, and the captain's not given the opportunity to make those decisions himself. How do you put that kind of in place to make sure that the captain learns and makes decisions and feels comfortable and confident making decisions?
Again, finding your communication that works with that captain. We also have to remember leaders come in different shapes and forms. There's not one leadership style. I might have a certain leadership style, whereas my captain might be very different. And I think at a young age, maybe sharing the opportunity to be a leader is important. Quite often we identify captains from a young age and they the captain and they do, well, actually, maybe, you can captain this game, you can captain the next game, and maybe share it out a little bit more and provide the opportunity to also maybe the captain who was your main captain and you're sharing it out doesn't deal with that too well. Now suddenly he's got to deal with that not being captain. And I think that's also another way of handling things. So we identify leaders within our groups. We form leadership teams and leadership corps. And again, it comes down to communication, Sean, how you get across your message. Ultimately, the coach can only set the game up. But once you're on the park, I believe that Kyle and the captain, or whoever your captain might be, is he's the chess player. He's the one putting the pieces in motion because he's in that pressure. He can feel the game when he's out on the park. Sometimes we can see things from the outside, but they're actually in the pressure on the inside. So we utilize 12th men, 13th men to get messages on, but it doesn't necessarily mean that those messages are always going to happen because Kyle might have a bit of a different view and maybe think that a different bowler might be important at this time. So again, it's finding the right communication that works for you and your team, and backing yourself to deliver that.
One of the things I've heard quite a bit about, and it also comes down to the mental side of the game, is that for our under-19s playing against a lot of these nations like England, India, they don't have the same fear of losing the wicket as what we do. So we'd rather not play a shot. And you spoke about going for fours and sixes, hitting boundaries on your side. But we told we've got to cherish our wicket and not lose our wickets. And there's a lot of pressure on the guys. So they'd rather go for a one instead of hitting out sometimes. How do you work around that? And is it actually a problem in our cricket?
Yeah, well, mindset, fear of failure, these are words that every player is going to deal with. So for me, that backing comes firstly from the philosophy and how we want to play. That backing comes from me as the coach to say that, look, if you're thinking about what's going to go wrong rather than what's going to go right, that thing you're thinking about that's going to go wrong generally happens. So it is, there are, things you can do to deal with fear of failure. Yes, it's in the way that you train. Are you training the way you're going to play in a match? Are you committing to your training? Are you committing to the things that are going to make you better? And again, every team is different, but I think the biggest message I will try to get across is it's very important that you as a coach, are you backing that player to play that way? And if he is getting out because of a certain way, is it an execution problem or is it a mindset problem? Is it because he actually got his plans wrong? But if he's backing himself and he plays a shot that he normally plays, but he just got that execution wrong, you've got to be very careful coming down hard on that player because you're encouraging to play that certain way, but you're the first one to say that he shouldn't be playing, that shot when he gets out. So there's confusion within the player. So for me, that comes out in training, and he's got to be able to take the way he trains. I'm going to play this way into the game. And I think it's your job to manage that. It's not your job to tell him exactly how to do that.
Last question on the bowling side. I feel that we're not producing as many out-and-out quicks as what we used to. So I find that the guys at one stage of bowling like 140, then we sit back and say, okay, well, let's focus on accuracy, slow the guy down to 135, 132 or something like that. And we're not blasting out opposition as much. I mean, it's a cheap thing to say when you got Kagiso Rabada and Lungi Ngidi, those kind of guys bowling. But when you look at how the Australians have got 7, 8 of these guys, you've got India now that they're bowling much quicker than us too. Suddenly you're getting all the other nations that have caught up and some of them overtaking us. I do understand there is a part with injuries and things, but they've got the same problem as us with injuries. What's wrong with letting like a guy just bowl as fast as possible, especially as a youngster, trying to get them just to bowl, and if they bowl a couple of wides, well, it's not the end of the world.
I think the best way I can say it is, as a coach, you quite often think because you're getting paid to do a job, you have to be giving out information to players. And I think the biggest question you can ask yourself is, this information that you're giving to that player, is it because you generally want to see them get better, or it's there to prevent injury? Or are you giving that information because you feel you have to say something as a coach? So if a young player is bowling well, he's bowling quick, he's got a bit of a different action, but he's actually not going to get injured doing it, and he's done it for a while and he's strong enough to do it, you know, why would you change that action? You know, and there's many examples of that. Lasset Malinga would never have come through probably an English coaching structure. He might now, because maybe they've changed their philosophy in the way they coach, but I think he probably wouldn't. So he was encouraged from a young age, because he played with a tennis ball, bowling on the beach or whatever else it might have been. He was encouraged to play that way. So it's finding a balance of what to say. It's finding a balance of why are you telling that player that? Are you making them better? Are you preventing injury? If not, you know, if it's not broken, don't try fix it. And I think encouraging players, quite often, like you say, the school coach will say, slow it down, stop bowling the wides, because the wides might end up costing them the game. So we keep coming back to this winning at all costs mentality. You know, so, but in a way that can work, but sometimes that can be detrimental to the game. It's a tough one to answer, but again, it depends on which environment you're in.
Thank you so much. This has been absolutely fantastic. I've totally enjoyed it, and it'll be great to, you know, keep in contact and carry on learning from you. This has been amazing, and I'm looking forward to see when you guys eventually can play cricket, what ends up happening at Scotland, because I think you guys are pretty much locked down like the rest of the UK, aren't you?
Yeah, we're in a bit of a tiered structure over here, you know, and we unfortunately don't have cricket for a long time, Sean. You know, we're only going to be playing next year, April, but when the cricket does come, I think it's going to be non-stop, which is what we're looking forward to. So April, we are in Papua New Guinea. May, we're in the Netherlands. June, we've pretty much got every month we got someone either coming to us or we're going to them. And then we've got a massive World Cup in October, a T20 World Cup. So can't wait for that. Our boys are training. They want cricket so badly. You know, I suppose our challenge is keeping those motivation levels up, and the guys have been terrific. But I'm quietly confident that we'll put a few performances out there that will surprise the world. I think we have some fantastic cricketers, and the guys just need more cricket, as does anyone. So I'm really looking forward to it, and looking forward to going to all those competitions. But thank you very much. I've really enjoyed chatting to you, Sean. It's even in the build up to this, chatting to you on the phone. I know we've had some long conversations, so thank you very much. And I look for, and if anybody out there wants to get in touch and, you know, talk the game of cricket, I love doing that. So please do.
Thank you very much, and thank you so much to all the coaches for listening in and joining us today. And I hope everybody has a great Saturday. In Joburg, it's very miserable here too, so we've got the same kind of day that you're having, and it's a bit cold too. So great. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, everyone.